So our speaker today is Audrey, come on up, Audrey, is Audrey Williams. She was one of our guides for the wonderful Burrell powerhouse tour that we had back a few months ago. She has been an archaeologist for Southern California Edison for 16 years and has recently been spending a lot of time here in the Kern River Valley because of all of the things that are going on with the 3 Edison power plants here in the valley. I imagine most of you know where they all are. The first one that was built was Burrell in 1904 down in the Lower Canyon. Then KR1, correct me if I've got them in the wrong order, KR1 at the mouth of the canyon, and then KR3 up here between Kernville and River Kern. Bob Powers has some of that history in his books North Fork Country and Kern River Country, but Audrey will be talking about that in a lot more detail today. So thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I wasn't necessarily going to go over this slide, but I heard people talking about it, so I will. The logos are oldest, top to bottom. They're not all the logos ever. They're just ones that I like, I guess. I'm not sure of the date of the top one because I don't know if it was really a formal logo. It's kind of weird. There was a different logo. And then the lightning bolt one, and then the one that looks like you're plugging into a wall, and there's some other ones in between there that are just kind of 70s boring, so I don't bother to put them on presentations. And then our current logo. Okay. So several of you may know these terms, but I'm going to use them a lot, so I figured it'd be better to make sure everybody's on the same page. So there's a National Historic Preservation Act that has a section of it that makes things significant and then therefore makes them eligible to the National Register under 4 different criteria. Criteria A, B, C, and D. A being associated with some sort of historic event. B being people, something to do with a certain person. C, we always think of it as like cute buildings, it's architectural type stuff. And D is for data potential that it may possess to learn about the past. So not everything that's old is significant, and that's part of the process. So if it is actually significant, it's an actual historic property. So historic property can be archaeological sites, Native American, historic, and they can also be buildings or structures. And then a historic district is multiple resources that are thematically linked, and you make it into a district. And things within a district may only be eligible to contribute to the district, or they can also be eligible on their own. 2 different statuses. And then there's things within the district that were created and are associated with it, but don't actually contribute. So therefore, they're not part of the historic property. And that's what the contributing elements are, things that are significant to a district. So I just wanted to, so when I'm rattling off these terms later, you're not saying, what is she talking about? Okay, so the presentation basically is trying to focus on the mighty Kern River and its potential for electrical power, because that was a big thing the whole time. So in the beginnings, the first powerhouse on the Kern River was located before Kern River 1 is located now, in the vicinity of the Kern powerhouse that was originally owned by PG&E, and now they sold it to Kuya or whatever their made-up name is. Kuya Hydro, or Kern Tule, that's it. Sorry, mixing my plants. Anywho, it was originally constructed by 1895 by the Electric Power Development Company, which was a subsidiary of the Kern Land Company. It was to bring water and power into Bakersfield and the agricultural fields. Eventually, it was bought by the San Joaquin Light and Power Corporation, which ultimately became PG&E, hence why PG&E was the owner for so many years. But they decided they purchased it in 1910, but tore it down by 1920, and then built the powerhouse that's there now. And still there. This is a historic photo. I didn't even know we had it till this week, because I'm not normally looking for this stuff. Of the spillway coming out, and at the spillway, I think, if it's not right there, there's another spillway that comes out right at the mouth of the canyon that is associated with their powerhouse, not Edison's powerhouse, even though it's really close to ours. Here's another photo. It's just a different angle, and then I just, thought that this, I don't know if you can see. It's hard to see because these pictures are pretty grainy. But there's the original powerhouse. I also just think it's very interesting. It's like, well, where's the big road here? Obviously not there. So I thought these were interesting pictures that I actually just found this week trying to make this presentation. Okay, so enough of those guys. So the Burrell Hydroelectric project, the plans for it began in 1895 with the Kern River and Los Angeles Electric Power Company, which was organized by Kirchhoff. And the interesting thing, and why that generally means something, is that there was definitely a hopping around of these guys from company to company. Kirchhoff also was part of a different company called the Mount Whitney Power Company. And there was for the Thule projects up north, and they split, and Kirchhoff actually ended up creating the San Joaquin Light and Power Company and going on to PG&E. So it was like people were together, people separated, people come back. It was really a fluid movement of companies back in the day. Anywho, so back to this project. So Kirchhoff, along with Henry Hogwood, who also surveyed the Kern Canyon for water in the early 1900s, started to design plans to make power electric stuff up here. They started enough work on the canals by 1897 just to keep it going, but they ran out of money. So Henry Huntington, the railroad guy, was constantly looking for power to bring to LA to power his electrical railroad cars. Because back in the day, back in that time, Los Angeles area was all not highways and not cars. It was multiple different rail systems. So one of the reasons that they were looking for these power houses to bring down to do that, and it's not just Burrell. Big Creek was built for some of that purposes. It's a reoccurring theme to bring power to LA. Shocker, right? Anywho, so he took over the company. Bought the Kern River Company, or the Kern River and Los Angeles Company, and created it as the Kern River Company, which is probably a name more people are familiar with. Ultimately, that becomes incorporated into Pacific Light and Power, but meanwhile, they started the construction of the canal by also buying, and I really kind of learned this from reading in Powers, buying land to get the water rights along the canal, and since then, I found some other circumstantial evidence, not that I don't believe it, about it. There's some photos in our collection of the Beatty Ranch and Sumner Ranch, and I'm like, well, why do we have these photos, right? And it says in the corner Edison bought or Kern River Company land, so obviously it's true. But anywho, the original camp for the headquarters for the Kern River Company was at the Hot Springs house, and that was news to me too. You can see it in the distance in this photo. Back around there. This is the original canal at Schoolhouse Cut. That's removed and it looks different now. But and then this was one of the construction camps at that time. Oh, that's clear. Yeah, that's not one of the best photos anyway either. So eventually the Kern River Company was absorbed in Pacific Light and Power in 1908. And then Edison merged with, or the Edison Electric Company at the time, but anyway, no, it was SCE at the time, sorry, the years get a little cloudy. Bought all Pacific Light and Power's facilities throughout, not just this one. By that 1917, and also, that was Big Creek and several other ones. Okay, so construction of the Varel system was, quite a engineering feat. There was not, obviously roads to get here. Most of the material was dropped off in Caliente by rail train, and then brought, by horses and mules and wagons across, through like the Havilah area down that way. So it was a big deal. And then the crews were, had camps all along the canals, at the intakes, at the powerhouse, so that they could, be working on it. Eventually, permanent working housing was built in, different locations. These are some cool pictures I found of, to the left of them constructing, trying to, there's not any big machinery here. it's just these guys digging away.
Wow.
And the horse and the plow. I do have a little side note because it makes me laugh. There was one time we needed to replace a pole in Big Creek, and it was in an archaeological site, and it didn't have truck access and all these issues. And I'm there with one of the, the distribution guys and some tribal folks, and we're like, oh, what can they do it by hand? And the Edison guy is like, yes, we're just gonna have to do it the way they did it when men were men. And so it's like my favorite thing. So anytime anybody whines to me that they can't do it, I'm like, don't make me say, you can do it like they did it when men were men. I feel like I can say it because I'm not the one who said it. Anyhow, back to the presentation. Okay, so this is one of the houses at the plant, down at the Burrell Powerhouse. There was multiple other houses, but as I'm sure you are all well aware, there was houses all up and down at every location. And most of them were moved in the 50s and 60s, and there is a few left. There's one at Kern 3. But it's turned into an office. Nobody lives there. Here's some other interesting photos of Burrell, especially those of you that went to Burrell recently. You may remember that this is not what the turbines look like. This is the original 5 turbines that were installed. They are Girard turbines, which apparently aren't very popular in the United States. They were mostly used in Europe, like France, I think, or Italy, I forget. Maybe Italy. Girard sounds Italian, right? And by the time, and they were used like earlier on, and by the time that the Burrell Powerhouse had these, it had already switched to using Peloton, was more of the ongoing thing. So apparently they didn't function to satisfaction. So they were, and the details are on the next slide, so I will get into it in a minute. They were changed out pretty quickly, multiple times, and a lot of reconfiguration. Get into the detail in a second. However, this is a picture of the original Burrell Dam. Prior to Lake Isabella being constructed, it was a wood dam. And so were like all the flumes, and mostly wood instead of steel. There was a whole campaign of changing things out over time because the wood wasn't holding up to steel. They really didn't change the dam to steel and cement until the construction of Lake Isabella. And then the lake deteriorated it, and you could see it again in the 80s, and they rebuilt it, and then, well, anyway. Okay, so here are some other cool photos I thought of them, because I was confused at first, because it's, the mule teams coming in, but it's not of the original construction, it's of them changing, because you can see it's starting to change the different configurations of the generators. or turbines, whichever one you want to call them. So in 1910, Unit 5 was replaced with a Doble impulse wheel, and then in 1913, other units were replaced with Francis type. Apparently, they can't make up their mind. And then in 1931, units 2, 4, and 5 were removed, and Penset 5 was removed. That's why, if you see it today, there's missing pieces throughout the canal landscape where anywhere there's tunnels, there's some things missing, and there's just the foundation standing there. Penstock 2 was disconnected from Unit 2 and reattached to Unit 3. I mean, it's just like that's a mess here, right? And in 1932, the 2 remaining Peloton wheels were turned 90 degrees so that the shafts align with the length of the building. This required the elbow in the penstock, which is down, I don't know if it's like down on the ground right before it goes in. And then penstock 3 and 4 were also combined. So on the top, they look like there's 2, but then down on the right before it goes into the powerhouse, they're combined to go into the new Unit 3. So lots of changes with the generators at Burrell. So the Burrell Hydroelectric project was constructed, from 1895 to 1904. It included a 127-mile-long wood pole transmission line. It was not steel. I want to emphasize that because there's in case if anybody has seen it, the Hydroelectric Power Hall of Fame or whatever it is, that is, I'm not criticizing them, but it's, it's made by whoever. It's not part of the National Register, it doesn't, not that it doesn't have significance, it doesn't have significance in that matter. And they put out on their webpage that they had steel towers. The Army Corps ran with that, put it in their recent project, so I just want to, it was never steel for Burrell. It was always wood, just to correct that. And so the line went, down through, past Havilah, down to, before you go past Havilah, down to the Caliente area. If you've been over there, it's like Indian Springs Road. There's still one of the old original substations standing. It's a weird looking building. I didn't put it in here, picture. There was 4 or 5 different substations that have since been removed. That one's standing, it's not operating. And there's another one near, is it Hughes Lake? Maybe there's a couple of them still just randomly standing there. There used to be a substation at Tahone, there was a substation at Castaic, those have been completely removed. But yeah, the line went down through Monolith and then terminated in downtown Los Angeles at the Los Angeles Steam Plant number 3. So at that time, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power didn't exist in the extent that they did. And throughout LA City, Edison serviced a bunch of the stuff, and so did whatever LADWP was at that time. And then in the 30s, they were able to kick us out, essentially, and supply power just themselves. So there are several facilities in the Los Angeles area that were originally part of Edison system that are no longer. And LA, just in case you're ever driving by, guess what it is? It's a brewery now. And you can see it from the highway. Anyhow, I digress. Okay, so the other thing to remember that substation down in LA not only brought power from the Kern River, from the Burrell plant, but it also brought in, it was a hub for the power plants out at Mentone and Sierra and the Azusa plants, which are all in the foothills of either the Angeles National Forest to the San Bernardino National Forest, right there. And those were some powerhouses that were, some of them before, then they date pre-Burrell, right? But the lines weren't as long, weren't necessarily as much power. It was, only 30 miles instead of 100 and some miles. They all met there, and then they distributed power to Los Angeles and to the railroads. And so this is a picture of the substation. And obviously LA does not look with grassy stuff. And I did finally kind of figure out from a different document where it was located. Like it described it across from a park and blah, blah, blah. And I did try to do a Google Earth and I couldn't find the building, so I don't think it's there anymore. Because sometimes it's amazing how many old substations are standing and reused as other things. Like the one that was in Venice is now an art gallery. Like, so it's kind of interesting that the substations don't necessarily, when the word buildings go away, they're no longer substations, they have been getting reused as other things. Okay, so the Burrell Hydroelectric System new historic district. So the last relicensing that Edison did of the project in the late 80s, early 90s, at that time, due to all those changes that we just spoke about, the changes of the turbines, the changes of going from wood to steel, most of the system has been completely overhauled and changed out pretty quickly due to problems, that it wasn't quite operating as you would want it to. Therefore, the evaluation found it not eligible, right? And so the Army Corps recently, when they commandeered, I'll say it that way, commandeered our flume, evaluated just that portion and had that portion not eligible, which makes sense because it was moved when it wasn't an original piece, right? But that's all they did. To complicate matters, back in the last relicensing, State Historic Preservation Officer never actually concurred, not because they didn't deny or disagree necessarily, they just didn't bother, I guess I would say, to do their job. They didn't respond. So if they don't respond, it can go, FERC will just go on, and if the advisory council doesn't object, then take it, right? So that's how we were just operating, but technically we didn't have the concurrence. Regardless, the decommissioning and surrender of the Burrell license would still trigger NEPA and Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, and for us to reevaluate the system. And that happens every time, whether we're relicensing or surrendering. So during the recent reevaluation, we have determined that the powerhouse itself is individually eligible as a historic property under criteria A for the significance of early hydroelectric power in Kern County area or along the Kern River, and as C, under C for its architectural design. There is a small portion of the canal between Pioneer Siphon and the forebay that's essentially untouched, so versus everything else that has been. So that portion retains integrity. It's not enough to be, that little piece of the canal would not be eligible on its own, but if you take that little piece of that canal and the powerhouse and put them together, there is a historic district. So it's eligible under a district, but there's only two contributing elements. And that's really kind of different and unusual. Most of the time when you have a historic district on a power, with a hydroelectric system, most things contribute. Whether it should really be a district or not, I don't know, but I don't have heartburn over it. I thought that also would kind of make maybe everybody in this room happy, make Tim Kelly happy. We're not worth the fight, right? Especially if we're going to have to tear it down. It's not like I'm not changing any maintenance or real super effect on Edison long term. Anyway, but totally happy with it, fine with it. This is just another picture of them now adding the cement to the inside of the canals. Any questions on Burrell before we move on?
Just quick, that piece of the canal you're talking about, I assume that's somewhere between Bodfish and Burrell?
I don't know, it doesn't say.
Not the picture, the part that...
Oh, okay, so yes, so the part that's still, okay, so the forebay, all right, so maybe I should have started with what a powerhouse does. I didn't do that. Okay, so there's the powerhouse and the penstocks that come down, right? And at the top is the forebay, right? And so it's the part of the canal from the forebay to wherever Pioneer Siphon is, and I don't know off the top of my head how far Pioneer Siphon is.
But somewhere up off
Yeah,
the canal.
Bodfish, yeah, somewhere towards Bodfish, but I don't know,
Okay.
right, yeah, so it's
That's what
just
I was-
that piece.
That's all I needed, thanks.
Okay.
Someone told me, and I've never been able to substantiate it, that the old ridge route actually followed the maintenance road for the power lines at Burrell.
Wow.
But I've never been able to substantiate that.
I don't know if I know I don't know if I
The
know.
old ridge route.
Yeah. I don't know, I'd have to look at a map. So, and that's like, I'm always trying to figure out, and I'll show you late, and even so they disconnected from Kern sub, and I put this in here really early on, like, 10 years later or something. And so it's been, and I actually finally found a map late last night, but it was grainy, so I didn't put it in here, where it shows, because Burrell goes, back, to Havilah, down to Monolith, somehow into Lancaster, and then somehow got down to LA, right? And I've always been trying, and I'm not like, how do I get there, right? And I did find a map yesterday, but I'd have to match it up to the trail, see if it followed. It might follow some of it,
If
No,
it went
but
to Lancaster, I don't think so.
right? But I think it went out Burrell, and then it drops down. It goes down to Monolith and Tehachapi, like through Indian Canyon, and down and then over somehow.
Okay. Yeah. That wouldn't be the case.
Okay. Somebody had a question back there?
So having this, the Burrell and the Forebay being a historical district, what does that mean?
It just means that if it gets removed, we have to document it more, and we have to do more things. So something being National Register eligible doesn't preclude it from being impacted or removed. That impact, or there are other laws that could protect it, right? Like if it's a national monument, whatever. But something being listed on the National Register does not stop it from being impacted. It just means that the removal or an impact, if it were like an archaeological site, is now considered an adverse effect under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. So we'll have to do mitigation, right? So if we're going to so even, let's say we didn't tear down the powerhouse, right? Say somehow there's a miracle happens and somehow that can get worked out. Making it not function and removing equipment would still be an adverse effect, even if we don't tear down the building. So we're going to have to do some sort of documentation. Some of it, one way is to do a historic American engineering record. We've had stuff where we've taken materials out of the powerhouse and donated it to a museum. We've created little mini powerhouses with stuff. It's really up to us to figure out what we want to do and what we think is good mitigation for it, right? So I would definitely at some point be working with you guys because you're the community that cares about it, right? And so the mitigation is supposed to be for the public to know and see what's been removed. Does that answer your question?
So a couple of years ago is when they stopped using that? Because I noticed there was always water now.
Right, so when
there's no water.
Right, so when the Army Corps, in their dam project, part of the safety measures was to make the canal that goes through the auxiliary dam inoperable and fill it in, so we can't get water anymore.
Oh, okay.
So there's no supply of water, so it forced our hand to decommission, because we can't, it's inoperable.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, moving on. Okay, Kern 1. So, Kern 1, the survey for Kern 1 was completed by an engineer with last name Finkel, who worked for the California Power Company, which later became the Edison Electric Company. The California Power Company was formed by the promoters of the Redlands Electric Light and Power Company, and began their original work on Kern River 1. They were organized in 1901, but had actually started acquiring water rights in 1900s. In 1902, the Edison Electric Company took over the California Power Company and construction of the project. Edison Electric Company was founded by George Baker and through a merger of the West Side Lighting Company. The reason that's important is that there is multiple millions, not millions, but hundreds of little different companies that were formed to now become SCE. And there is probably definitely different arguments of when you wanted to decide that SCE was founded, right? And you could pick different dates. Somebody picked the date way back when. Like there is like, if you at the Huntington Library where all our records are, there's several variations of our history, like written down by like past Edison presidents and whatnot. For whatever reason, they decided that our inception is from the West Side Lighting Company, and when that was formed, so that's why this is important. And then Edison Electric Company in 1909 was reincorporated as Southern California Edison. So there you go. This is one of my favorite pictures. Oh, I didn't find the call number. I did try it because I wanted to share this with you guys later, to give you the call numbers, and I'll give you the Huntington Library website. So like if you want to look at one of these pictures, you don't have to spend an hour trying to find it. But anyway, here's one of the early pictures of the Kern River 1 powerhouse. It's one of my favorites because the guys on the tramway or what, I don't know if that's what that's called. I feel like it has a different name. Anyway, that could get them across the river. Cable way, yeah, that's probably what it is. And then there's a picture of Democrat Dam right after it was constructed. Okay, so Finkel's survey. So Finkel, as some of you I'm sure know, actually identified 5 different potential locations to build powerhouses. One of them being the Kern River 1, which has been built and constructed, 14 miles upstream of the mouth of the canyon. And then Kern River 2, which was supposed to be upriver somewhere, above Burrell, never constructed. Plant 3, where it's located, on the North Fork of Kernville. And then there was also plans for 2 additional plants above Kern 3, but they were obviously never constructed. So, thank you, Diana, it's got me thinking. And I know this is not a good, it's hard to see. So, I was here, I don't know, what was my last trip here? No, I've been here since then. But anyway, last time I saw you. And you guys have a copy of this map printed out, right? Like it's a print copy and it's, longer than this table. And I was looking at it and it says Kern River Company is drawn in 1904, and it's a drawing of the North Fork, and when you can zoom in and look, you can it says what kind of farm, whose canal, all different really good information, and but as you said, everybody's crawling around on the floor trying to look at this, and I'm like, I've never seen this map, but Edison, we have all our historic drawings and stuff, not out to the public, but I can access them internally. And I was like, well, theoretically, this should be in there, but I've just never looked for it. So anyway, lo and behold, I found it. But I was a little confused about it being the Kern River Company 1904, because they should be kind of like out the door. But that's the date of the Burrell actually going online, but Kern River Company is dead at that point. So then I was thinking, maybe it's part of Finkel's surveys. I don't know. That's just that came to me when I was putting this together. Don't know, right? But Finkel had worked, at that time. I don't know. Anyway, food for thought. I have no idea what the answer is.
So Audrey, this map then is available digitally?
Yes, I sent it
Audrey
to.
sent us one.
Yeah. So I sent you the TIFF.
Wow. Wow.
so that you can have like the high quality. Yeah, so it's really interesting when you can zoom, but at this scale, like it's gibberish.
So that means it would be available at the annex, then,
It's
Yes.
available at the end.
the digital copy.
Right.
And the original paper map is great fun and well worth crawling around on the floor to look
It's amazing the amount of information.
at. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't know if we have, I mean, since we have it digitally, we probably have a copy of it too. I did find some other like mini Southport one. I think I need to,
Wow.
I downloaded something, anyway. It wasn't much, but something.
Oh,
Don't let me, like,
We
a couple weeks go by, ping me and say, send me that. Okay. All right, Kern River 1 construction. Again, obviously a major undertaking, you know, due to the location. A series of steep and difficult roads were constructed through the Kern River Canyon Gorge to the powerhouse and to the workers' camp. And then 3 additional camps were reached by a 12-mile trail built along one side of the gorge. I'm not sure where that trail is and what side it's on. I haven't researched that far yet. Bakersfield this time was the nearest railhead, so a lot of the projects came from Bakersfield. And there is and that's why I don't know for sure. I've tried to research this, how there's, you know, a location on the east side of Bakersfield named Edison, like that. And I've tried to research that, and the rail line goes through there, and the rail line also goes right in front of the McGunnon substation, which is a substation that connects to Big Creek. Anyway, I'm wondering if that's why that rail station got the name Edison. I don't know. I'm completely, that's just a thought. Have no evidence other than what I've just told you, right? Like I've tried to I haven't spent a great amount of time on it, but I've looked into it before. Anyway, so road improvements were made for mules and horse teams to haul materials from Bakersfield. A stable was built. That's a picture of the stable, and the stable was actually only just removed post 2006, because I started working at Edison in 2006, and I remember it wasn't me, but somebody else was working on the project to get this, because the, you know, it's right there. You know how tight that corner is, and trucks are bigger, and nobody can get in because they wasn't used as a stable. Obviously, in 2006, it was used as storage, but it actually lasted pretty recently.
So I just had a question. So this is the one that's at the mouth of the camp?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
But that's not being used anymore.
The stable or the powerhouse?
Are you talking about the PG&E outside, or it's up a mile or so when
So this one,
it's in?
this one, right, is in. It's 14 miles up. It's online. It's working. It's online. The one PG&E, the old PG&E one, is also online. It's just switched ownership. And we're just starting the relicensing of this to keep it going, because the FERC license will expire soon. Okay.
So, if I've got my location right, so Upper Ridge Bar, there's a place where you drive and there's a gate there. And you can see evidence of an old camp there. And you can access the flume from there.
I'm not sure where Ridge Bar is.
Yeah, Upper Ridge Bar was actually used for several different camps. One was an Edison camp. One was in 1922, the camp for building the road. What was the third one?
But this was the opposite, the campground, so on the east side.
Right.
Yeah, you can see evidence of where there
Right,
was.
but there were 3 different camps,
Okay.
not to mention a Native American site there. Unfortunately, when Tim went to study the area, someone had collected all the stuff at Upper Ridge Bar and brought them and put them, we had a little false trash can, false porch over here, they were all in trash cans on the porch. And I think that's the closest I've ever seen Tim to crying. Because the story's gone now. You
Did they
get-
dig or did they just collect off the surface?
They picked the site clean. I don't think they dug. They just picked up anything along the surface. And so he can't tell now which camp, which things came from.
Because this one, what I'm thinking of it, is actually a trail, an old trail that goes up to the flume from there.
Yeah.
So
That camp had been an Edison site at one point, but it had also been used for other things.
So, when we get to Kern 3, I and others have done more research on the location of camps for Kern 3. We have not for Kern 1 yet, because the system hasn't been looked at since the 90s to be evaluated back then, and just haven't had the need, but those are like, and we have, variable different information levels of where camps were located, right? And so I might know more in a couple years, because that is something that will be researched as part of relooking at the system and the upcoming relicensing. But I had a need to find those maps and see what we have. So how successful I will be is to be determined. Okay. Okay, so, sure.
So there's a group in Bakersfield there, they want to get a good trail system down there, they're calling it the Kern Gateway or something. And they've been taking groups of people up to walk along the flume up there where it's safe. There's a lot of areas where it's not safe.
I'm sure.
But, I don't know how far this group has gone in making progress towards that. So
I know that the Forest Service asked us before for we provided them with maps of where some old Edison trails were. It might be with that same group or something. We also still use certain trails to access the flow line now that aren't currently part of the FERC license that we're going to try and put into the FERC license. But yeah, I know that there's trails all around there. I just don't necessarily know where they all are.
Audrey, the picture before this one, on the lower picture, was that the building there? Was that the stable?
Yes.
Okay, so that doesn't exist anymore, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so the good portion of the canal aqueduct flow line of Kern 1 is tunnels. There's over 20 tunnels that had to be, drilled through solid rock. This is obviously a picture of one of the tunnels. When the tunnels were being constructed, this tunnel and every other tunnel probably, they usually put rail tracks into it so the guys could go up and down. This is what I thought was really is interesting fact of Kern River 1. I thought there was a historic photo of something. I couldn't find it yesterday, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That a temporary powerhouse was constructed about 1.5 miles in, so that they could use hydraulic drills and whatnot to do the excavation work. And that's kind of a unique thing. I don't know. I'm not saying no other powerhouse did that. I just don't know of one, right? Anywho, so they had 6, and they had multiple, air pressure plants, with different voltage, different horsepowers. There was a series of adits. A lot of times the adits are cut in to the tunnel so that you can access them midpoint, and essentially construct them faster instead of having to go all the way through and all the way out, right? And likely safer. And then at one point, construction was delayed for about a year so that the company could focus on the construction of Santa Ana and Lido Creek, which are both out in the San Bernardino area, and continue working on some of those plants, as well as a generating plant in East Los Angeles. Then they came back with gusto. They hired 200 men and then doubled it by January. Finally, in 1905, the tunnel was complete. And then by May of 1907, the powerhouse was complete, and it transmitted power on the first lattice steel line in the United States, at least, down to the LA steam plant and via out Los Angeles. It was in a different right-of-way than the Burrell. It's not the same right-of-way at all. It goes kind of further west. Okay, so on the last relicensing effort in the late 80s, early 90s, the system was deemed eligible as a historic district. It currently has a period of significance from 1910 to 1930. What that means is like after 1930, things are changing or construction's done. So if you added or did something in the 1950s, that would not contribute to the district, which is typical. All of them have a period of significance. I just might not have mentioned them for all of them. It's significant for development of power in Southern California. At the time, it had the highest head reaction turbine in the world, and what that means is the speed of water coming down the penstock to generate more power. So that was a big deal. The powerhouse is a fine example of the Mediterranean Riviera style, and what's funny, a rare example, that's kind of funny. Why it's funny to me is that I was thinking about this again too, that Santa Ana River 1, which dates pre-Burrell, looks exactly the same, and Mill Creek 2-3, exactly the same. Like it's the three same powerhouses. So it might be rare, but we have three of them. Anyway. And it's significant, wait, this is wrong. We don't have historic archaeological sites. Somehow this is, oh my lord. Okay, apparently I was not thinking well. All that information is about Kern River 3, not about Kern River 1, but I got a photo of Kern River 1 and a Kern River 1 title. So something happened there. What happened here? So, missing slides. Okay, well, we can go back to talk about Kern River 1. Yeah, the period of significance would be at least 1904. So I'm not remembering what the last of it is. Nonetheless, the system is eligible. The dam, the tunnels. It was the first steel line. Apparently, this slide is all foobarred and got two different things going on. My apologies. But we'll correct that before we send that out. Something happened there. Okay. Any questions on Kern River 1 before we move on? Yes?
The little community there, above Kern River 1,
Uh-huh.
when was that?
That's-
Taken down?
It's still there.
Is it still there?
Well, do you mean across the road?
Yeah, across the road.
Yeah, it's still there. The buildings there's multiple buildings are still there.
I know there were school kids that came out of there.
Oh, yeah, I don't, like all the buildings aren't necessarily there, but there's a good deal that are. Still there, and like I think it's one is at least an office. I don't know how often they use that one, or how often people go there. I think more they go to Kern River 3. I think also it's just easier access coming in and out of there. But no, those buildings are still there.
I was just gonna ask you, what are the pen stops? Is that where you'll burn the water into the turbine? Or?
Right. So a hydroelectric system either has a dam that is what's called run of the river, which are all these plants are, versus like Big Creek where they have big huge reservoirs that control the water, and then they go through some sort of system of tunnels, canal, open flumes to get down to the forebay, which is the settling pond right before it goes down into the penstocks. And then the penstocks, they're on a 6-feet climb, and they push the water, get the velocity to generate power, and then the water cycles through the powerhouse, and then it spits back out into the whatever river it's on, usually through a tail race or some other exit.
So number 3 is the one that's beyond, just up
Right.
It's right up here.
Right.
So the pipe that goes up there, is that?
That's the big pipe that you see on the hill, that's the
That's
penstocks,
That's the
Oh,
penstock.
okay.
right? So those are the penstocks on that one.
So how was that water, I've never seen it over the other side, but
So at the top of the, hold on.
I was just curious where that water was.
So let me,
We have a great diagram inside the museum
I have a,
that shows,
I have a, I have a,
Okay.
I have a die. Oops, sorry, I gotta, how do I switch to showing the screen? How do I do that? That's it, okay, so, so this is the Kern River 3 system, right? So, I don't know, can't really read it right, but so up here is Fairview Dam, right? So that, and it's a small settling pond. So it, and then it comes over the dam and it goes into a series of tunnels, right? So these squiggly lines down here are roads coming in. But the tunnel, a series of tunnels, there's some small dams here that bring water from different creeks. But essentially it runs through the Kern is like all tunnels and adits. There's no open flume on Kern 3, but theoretically there could be open flumes. And it comes down to here, which is the forebay, right? And the forebay holds the water before it shoots it down penstocks to the powerhouse. I wish that was in somewhere.
yeah.
I can read it.
Oh, okay.
But and so all powerhouses are all hydroelectric systems. Is that one better?
So the river, like, in other words, we've done a lot of fishing along there.
Right.
So I was just wondering, so when the river's coming down, it's not going in there.
So it comes in, right, it comes in at the dam, right? So we siphon, so water comes over the dam and continues down the river. And then it also goes into what's called an intake. So it's part of it gets diverted into the intake. It follows down here, down to the powerhouse, and then shoots back out. So if you're a boater in Kern County, in Kern River, and why you hate Edison, it's because from here to here, minus this year, when we take water, it lessens the flow of the river in this section. So it lessens their
So right at
experience
that
of
building,
white
they're
water
not
rafting.
getting water from the Kern River, it's coming over the pipes, right?
Right, so we
Oh,
get,
okay.
we take some of the water, some goes, we take some of it, and it comes down through, and then it eventually goes back into the river.
Oh, okay.
That structure upriver at the Fairview Dam.
Okay, where kind of goes over.
Right,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
part of it goes,
So that's where the diversion is. It actually goes through that structure, underneath the road, and then it goes through the mountain, 13 or 14 miles,
And then
to
comes back down.
the penstocks and come back.
right.
Wow, okay, thank you.
No problem.
Also a big cycle there.
There's a big
Right.
siphon.
Right, some have siphons, and you know, that was, the siphon is kind of functions like a penstock, as it creates velocity, and for whatever reason, instead of burrowing through, they, had to go up and down the hill, and it goes like that, and so it's a big siphon to give power, like velocity can come back down. You had a question?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about the forebay? I always understood there was some kind of a gate, so if debris coming in, it gets caught in the gate. But then you talked about some kind of like a settling pond in the forebay before it shoots down the penstocks, or what is that?
So, a settling pond or sandbox is right after, is usually on any system, is usually located right after the dam. So on Fairview, if you go by Fairview, and there's a photo, I'll show you a photo in a minute, because we'll go back and forth. Is the settling pond that tries to take out dirt, and clean it, the water, so you don't have a bunch of dirt going through, as soon as you capture it after the dam. And then it goes through a series of tunnels or flumes, and then at the end is the forebay that then does clean the water again, and also holds it to push it down the penstock. So the settling basin or our sandbox is closer to the dam, and the forebay It's closer to, it's at the other end, at the pen stocks, but they somewhat serve kind of the same purpose. Make sense? Okay. Okay. So this is a picture of the actual part of the siphon. I just think this picture is awesome. And I do have another picture of it, but coming down the hill. I don't know if it's or going back up the hill. I don't know the direction of the siphon, but I just think it's pretty cool to see the guys, sitting on it, and you can actually get to it, like to where it at the bottom, and walk up to it. It's kind of, I've done it once. It's kind of pretty amazing because it's ginormous, right? Obviously, if there's that many guys on it, it's bigger than me, but I guess you just don't really, I don't know what you expect until you're like actually sitting there and looking at it, and you're like, wow, it's kind of massive. Okay, so the water rights for the Kern River 3 project were obtained at the same time of Kern 1 and all the surveys done. Finkel resigned in 1909. There was some sort of, I can't remember if it was, there was some sort of failure of something at Kern River 1. And I can't remember what it was, and that's why he retired. Anywho, or maybe he was pushed out, I don't know. The story says retired, or resigned. And then they hired William Breckenridge to finish the designs of the project. I'm assuming that's why places around here are called Breckenridge, but I don't know. No? Wrong one?
Civil War.
Oh well,
Okay.
sounded good. Anyway, okay, so, but mapping of the project was completed by 1911. By 1910, SCE had retained water rights and built a rough road up to Fairview Dam. A couple of camps along the roads were completed by 1911, and then plans for the powerhouse were not actually approved to 1914. Little was completed during World War I. It was mostly just, working on some of the tunnels. And then at the end of World War I, back onto it, right? So between 1919 and 1921, was a big push to finish the project. The first generator began supplying water to the Kern Valley on April 1st, 1921. So the project is, dam, the intake, settling basin or sandbox, 13 miles of conduit, 2 auxiliary dams, a 4-bay, then there's 2 penstocks that go into the powerhouse, and then there's some other ancillary features. So how many ever penstocks you have should be the amount of turbines you have. So 2 penstocks, 2 turbines. 4 penstocks should equal 4, except for Crazy Burrell with their combining. But generally saying, the construction was pretty massive. There was multiple camps, as you can see on that other map, and they are, the buildings aren't there, but the tent pads and whatnot, are pretty well preserved, and I also think that they're more easily accessible, because the roads go right by them. We have a distribution line that goes along there, so we're, for multiple different reasons out there surveying and able to relocate them, versus Kern 1 may be more problematic because of slope and, slope. Some, in areas of deep slope, they did build camps on hillsides with, poles to hold up the house and whatnot. But in this area, they had enough flat spaces to build some pretty big camps and for the remains to be left behind. The largest was headquarters camp. It had 40 buildings, including cottages, dormitories, a cookhouse, kitchen, dining room, warehouses. I mean, this is kind of typical for any big project like this to have this. They also had a hospital, which was dubbed Hospital Flat, shocker. And a lot of, there was a hospital for Kern 1. I don't know if there was one for Burrell. I don't remember ever seeing that, but a lot of projects had hospitals. And then by the end of the project, 12 million pounds of gunpowder was used and 21,410 gallons of gasoline. So You would be, there's still like, there is like books of accounting, like how much each bolt costs,
Oh my gosh.
right? Like, if I want to poke my eyes out, but if I wanted to, I could find out and figure out, maybe somebody else has, and somebody else would love to do it, but it would not be my thing, how much a project cost to construct back then.
Oh my gosh.
Like, but I love finding those because that's when how I find out, like, not because how much a stupid bolt costs, right? But like if it's a transmission line, how many structures were built, when it was built, how much long it took, how many guys were hired, like more of the human history than the math about it. So they're very interesting documents, and I just read what I like. So here's another picture of the siphon. It's where, you know, it's the bottom part of the siphon, it goes up either side of the hill there. I just thought this was pictures, it's probably, you know, same guys, it's the same day the photo was taken. You know, in the Model T Ford right there. I thought that was a good picture. And then these are pictures of of constructing the Kern River 3 roads. I don't know if this is, you know, the main highway road or individual roads up. It doesn't.
Pretty rough.
Nonetheless, it's a pretty rough road. Okay, so the Kern River 3 system is eligible. It was determined eligible during the last relicensing efforts. And, you know, and basically the majority of the system itself is eligible other than like the 2 little auxiliary dams because they were added in the 40s and the 50s. They weren't original. And then 2006, maybe no, 2010-ish, I'm just gonna say that for sake of argument. We proposed to replace a bunch of culverts along the roads. We had to do a bunch of survey, and that's when we first really realized how most of the camps were still visible on the surface and whatnot. And we went through a process of amending the nomination to expand it to be the construction camps, right? So, but it has to be main construction camps, some tramways, historic trails, the roads. There are multiple little satellite areas where they just had a compressor or small little camps that each added. Those don't contribute, nor does the tunnel muck or waste rock piles, depending on where you are. People call it different things. You know, all the rock that is left behind from digging out the tunnels are not. This is a picture of the sand box, the settling pond that you can see. This building's still there. No, wait, is that not that building? It's not still there. Anyway, so you can see this from the road, the dam.
Are we looking south?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay, yeah, we are looking north. So this
Looking
building
north.
is still there, right? The road's over here, you can't see it, sorry.
So the dam's above
So
it.
the dam is up here, and this is coming down. Right, sorry. So that's the sandbox. You can see it from the road. The fence, I mean, literally, it's the road, the fence, the sandbox, it's right there. This is an interior shot of the Kern 3 powerhouse with the 2, and they had Francis type turbines, but they're pretty powerful. And then, any other questions generally on Kern 3? Yes.
Where is that power curtain sent?
Where does the power go?
Yes.
They all go in the grid now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
no specific place.
there was, right, so the original line for Kern 3, which this map will show, good question, good timing, goes, I wish it was not so grainy. I'll change that. Hold on, I did. Sorry, hold on. can get out of PowerPoint, maybe then I can zoom in and out and it'll be able to not be so grainy.
Oh. There you go.
There we go. Okay. So this is a 1931 map, circa 1931 map of Southern California Edison Company, right? So here's Kern River 3 powerhouse. It goes over to Vestel substation, just south of Porterville. So that's the lattice steel line that comes out, and that's where it always went. And then it also, at the time, it interconnected the Burrell powerhouse to the Kern River 3 powerhouse. So that's where, so it comes, you know, these two lines were built at the time. This one's a lattice steel over to Vestal, so it goes into the grid there. And then this one interconnected with Burrell.
So Audrey, I assume that's the line that goes over Greenwood Summit?
Yes, correct, correct. So just real quick overview of Edison. So this is the Big Creek plants. You know, they're not in our service territory. They're actually a PG&E service territory, but we bring power down. Edison services San Joaquin Valley here, and then goes back out, you know, services Kernville, obviously. And then, you know, doesn't service Bakersfield, kind of skirts the mountains here. And then, you know, services, you know, the LA basin and, you know, out all the way out to like Palm Springs, minus the kind of the center where Los Angeles, LADWP services, and then random, like, you know, Glenville has their own power, Pasadena has their own power, like there's random little spots, but generally, you know, and then we service up to Santa Barbara. Okay, so that's, you know, so this is the system in 1931. I just thought it would be interesting to show you like where these things fit into the overall.
So can we look at where KR1 goes? I'm wondering if that might not be the one that went along the ridge route.
So KR1, and this is still how it goes today. So here's KR1. It goes
East of Bakersfield somewhere.
right. So it's on the east side of Bakersfield. It comes through. It goes through. So if you're leaving, so we go down the canyon, right? It goes down to like Rio Bravo Ranch, and cuts across to like, you know, cuts towards like Tajon Ranch, right? And then it comes across like wheat patch area, and then thank God I didn't paper smells. I'm like, and then it comes up the grapevine, and there's a couple towers, and then it does this across the bottom. It goes to Fort Tahoe, comes back over, it goes through like the meadow, comes back over, you know, runs along some other canal there, and then it like at the 14.5 it pops back over, and then like I see this every time I come from here going home. And then I get on the 405 and it crosses the 405, and then it went into a substation there, and then kept on going, but not as much anymore. And then there's also that line's also a double circuit line, so it does split off here, right? So it splits here and does go now, and I think it does turn to wood poles here, and interconnects back to Monolith substation, which also connects back with Burrell, right? And it still does that.
Going back, the picture you showed of the generators in our plant here,
Uh-huh.
are those the original generators
Yes.
that were put in there?
Yes.
Wow.
So most powerhouses have the original generators. They might change out like, you know, pieces or the Pelton wheel or something, but most of our powerhouses do have the original ones. There's not that many that have been modified like that. The ironic thing is that the Girard Kaweah 2 in history too. Also had a Girard turbine originally, and that one has been modified and changed too, so don't buy a Girard. But yeah, most powerhouses do have the original turbines in there.
I just had a quick question.
Uh-huh.
So basically, way back when, you know, from the very first, when they started Hydroelectric, was that mainly service LA?
But so yes, both. So the way the system goes is that there was about in the beginning everything was, you know, there was the gas plants that you don't want anymore, but there was also steam plants. So we had all these, you know, Redondo Beach, Long Beach had 3 different steam plants, Huntington Beach had all these steam plants along here. So they were building that there to power LA, and that wasn't enough. And so they also were building hydroelectric plants. You can see, oh God, I love this map. I didn't know how great it was. Like the Ontario ones I was talking about, Lido Creek, Fontana, and you know Santa Ana, Mill Creek, which is the earliest powerhouse. I think in California, but it's definitely the earliest one we have in Santa Ana. These 2 are older than Santa Ana 1 and this are older than Burrell. But so they had a bunch of powerhouses out here. Some of them have burned and gone away. Some of them still work. That originally.
So these were all hydro.
Right, all hydro. So also the technology at the time was, you know, if you know the Edison and Tesla war of AC, alternate current versus direct current. Alternate current doesn't go as far without an amp, but will go farther than DC. Anyway, so that at the time, you know, in transmission voltage, even back then, it was low. It was 10. You know, and the original, like, it was 33 kV, whereas it was considered transmission, which today is distribution. And they were bringing these lines into LA, and so these were the first ones, and they were only going like 30 miles, 50 miles, right? And then like the construction of Burrell and Kern 1, you know, they start going hundreds of miles to bring power down. And then Big Creek, you know, they jumped up to 110 kV originally, and then to 220, and it's bringing it even over 200 miles down. And eventually, like, the backbone of the Edison transmission is that this is generally where Big Creek terminates, and then Long Beach is our main hub along the coast. And it was a big deal in 1927 when they interconnected both the systems. So it was a bunch of hydro and a bunch of steam plants and connecting that to spread power out.
But generally, that was all being taken to LA, so was it really used up here?
No, it was used up here too, but it was
Very limited up here. Remember the check for Burrell? We've got a check inside the museum that Andy Brown wrote to Pacific Light and Power for $30,000. And that gave him a spur that went to Weldon. And then there was already an agreement in the water rights that there's also a spur that goes to Keysville, because the Keys mine was run on electricity. But other power to other places in those really, really early days was
not the intent.
So, Marge Powers, which at that time it was Old Kernville, but she said when KR3 first went online, they still didn't have power in Old Kernville, so they held Saturday night dances at KR3 because there was power and they could have lights.
Yeah. And see, that's why Old Kernville had all the ditches, and so when they moved up here, they did the ditches here on Soretta because those people had water rights to generate power out of those ditches. And we've got a little wheel back by the big gate that went underneath the Goldberg Ranch. It was a little water wheel. They had a Model T generator and they generated enough power for lights in their house.
Interesting. Thank you.
So,
Right, so, yeah, so the transmission, you know, is bringing it down, but, and it is really interesting to see different towns get, different power. You guys have you have a copy of the Iron and Copper Wire. In that book, it's a book about Edison and the development of the system. It, you know, even lists, when different communities got power. Right, so there's, you know, two things happening: getting the transmission to bring to LA to feed the electric rail system. That's how people were getting around. Also, the communities, right? And then yes, and then it was, you know, I don't know.
Right.
I have to look up. But when was the first more distribution line out going, you know, all over? That wasn't probably not right when they built the plants. It was a little bit later.
All right, thank you.
I like that map.
I do too. I just found it last night. I'll send it to you. No one.
That's
Right. No, I like it also because I mean, there's different versions of these maps through time, but I like when they have their powerhouses because it makes it, you know, so. You know, meanwhile, there was the Thule, I guess, I wonder which one that is. It's just the Thule 1, that's a lower Thule. Ours, PG&E has an upper Thule, or had. And then, you know, there was the Korea plants that were constructed around the same time to bring power to Larry for the farming. You know, and then, yeah, this only has some of their early Big Creek plants. But yeah,
I like that.
there was, I don't know if they have them, like, there was some steam plants and some other stuff, and I don't see them on this map out here, but yeah, so we actually service now past Gaviota. We service to whatever that point is, that last Point Conception, and right past there's a burger joint on the beach. That's the last thing we service. And then it turns into PG&E.
Oh, we got you all sidetracked.
Yeah, like I keep talking, I come up with random facts, you know. Another guy I work with, Archaeologist, Adam, he always says, I don't know what part of your brain cracked open to make you retain this weird stuff.
But it's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. It's not, I didn't necessarily ever think it would be, but I do now.
Makes you appreciate electricity.
Yeah, it's always a crack up to me, and I get it. People don't want something or want this and that, but yeah, you want your lights on too, right? Like there's gotta be some balance at times. Any other? That's it for my presentation. Yes.
Maybe you know this. Where's Hydroelectric today? Is it a dinosaur, or is there any kind of development with Hydroelectric today?
So, I don't know how much will go into the future. Our the last plant that Edison built was the Eastwood Powerhouse up in Big Creek. And it's not on the National Register, but I think it could be easily at some point, potentially, because it's a mile in and a mile down. Like, you have to get down in a car and tunnel to get to it. I don't really know how much new hydro's being built. The more fun stuff is, you know, like PG&E sold their Kern power and they sold their Thules, like all these little hydro projects. They don't make a lot of, I mean, they make power, but they don't make a significant amount of power, and they cost a lot for a big company to maintain. So there is a trend, like Edison is looking into it. We haven't sold any of them yet, but you know, in selling off, I don't know that Kern would be part of it, but some of our other little ones are selling them off to other companies and smaller companies operating them. So there is the small hydro that seems to be getting, you know, torn down other places. I think it's just also, it doesn't produce that as much power. It doesn't have the green energy, right, wrong, or not different as much as like solar fields and stuff to go green. Yeah, hydro doesn't get as much credit. I know. I think solar fields are the greenest, blackest thing on earth because they destroy a lot. But nobody asked me my opinion. So yeah, I don't know that there's a big future in building new hydro.
Any more questions for Audrey?
Nothing to add.
Thank you very much.
Okay.